So here we come to station number 3, read to yourself. See there, I'm sitting with my cup of coffee. Okay, what should you do when you're reading to yourself to do it the right way? You're going to read quietly. You're going to sit in one spot where you are very comfortable. You're going to get started straight away. It helps build your stamina, your reading stamina, so you can read more words and more books. And this is now your quiet, your own time to read. Okay, here are the different activities. So the first activity is stories to tell, where you can do a bit of research on Google about stories and why do we tell stories. Activity number 2 will be the best book I have read, and you're going to do a book review. Activity number 3 is a reading response to a book you've read. Activity 4, you're going to read with your senses, meaning you're going to pay attention to how they describe things in a book by looking, by smelling, by hearing, by tasting, or by touching. And finally, activity number 5 is an interview with a character from a book, a pretend interview, of course. Here is something very interesting that I found. So to make reading to yourself a little bit more interesting, there's a few ideas of how you could do it. So you could read with a hat on. You can read to your favorite stuffed animal. You can read in bed, which is of course great fun in this colder weather. You can read under a table. You can read under a blanket with a flashlight, or you can read upside down. However you like to read, choose something in that block during this week that you will be doing these stations. Okay, activity number 1. So, recently, all of you have learned about writing a fiction text or a narrative text, which is the fancy words for basically saying you wrote a story. You know what a setting is, you know what the characters are, how a story consists of a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay, and you know a beginning, a middle, and an end is called the plot. And part of that plot is that there's always a problem which needs to be resolved. Okay, so that's just what you've done recently, so you know about stories. Now I want you to be a story researcher. You are going to go to Google and you're going to find out more about stories, and you're going to answer the following questions on the activity sheet. You can also ask mom and dad to maybe give you some information, what they know. Okay, so you're going to find out what is a story exactly and why do we tell stories. Now, how would we retell or pass on stories? And of course, mom and dad would say, or grandpa and grandma would say, that stories have been passed on from generation to generation by retelling the stories. But of course, today in our modern times, it's not done so much anymore as they used to do it. Today, stories get passed on in many different ways, and I want you to find out what that is. Okay, and then of course, name a few of your favorite stories. Okay, activity number 2. So, this is now to kick off your own read to self activity. I want you to think of the best book you've read this year or even in grade 3. Now you're going to pretend that you're a journalist for a magazine or a newspaper, and you're going to write a book review of that book that you loved so much. And you're going to describe that book. So there's your worksheet. You're going to write the title of the book and the author who wrote it. You're going to color in your star rating for the book. Then you're going to write a very short blurb. You know what that is, at the back of a book on the back page, or on the inside, the flap, if you open the book, there's always a little short description that gives you a taste of what the book is going to be like. Of course, you shouldn't give away the big main problem and how it's resolved, but you can start touching on a problem that there might be in this story. Okay, then you tell us why you love this book and who would you recommend this book to? So here we have activity number 3. You're going to find a book of your choice to read. Now, guys, if you do not have books at home, or if you are looking for something new to read, there are many books on YouTube which people read to you, or the books are just being animated. So you can put the sound off on the YouTube video and you can read the book by yourself. Then there are also some other lovely websites with free online ebooks. One like that is Oxford Owl, but you'll quickly have to ask mom or dad to register. Just give their details and then you immediately have access to free books. There are some lovely ones there and you can choose them according to age. Even though I would recommend they are written for first language English speakers, the kids in England. So you could choose a book that's for a younger age, like the books that says 7 to 8 around there. They will be quite fine for you, but of course you can try the harder books as well. Another one that your parents can look at is the Barnes & Noble free Nook books for kids. So that is an app that you can download to your cell phone or your tablet or a laptop. And there's many free books to read. Okay, so once you have your book, you are going to go to your workbook and start on a new page. You're going to write the date, whichever date you will be doing this on, and you will be writing reading response. As a heading, underline it as always. Okay, and then you can use lovely bubble writing, colorful bubble writing any way you want to write the word reading response. And you see I did it in a little wave as well. Then you write the following things in your book. You're going to skip a line after reading response, then you're going to write book title, underline it, and write down the name of your book. Then you're going to skip a line, you're going to write pages read, and you're just going to write there how many pages you've read. 3, 7, 20 pages. Then you're going to skip a line, and then you write down 3 things that happened in the book. And you write very shortly, just 3 things that you remember that happened in the book. Then you write the heading 2 words or phrases I found interesting. And you can also do it in bubble writing like I did. Okay, so any 2 words or 2 phrases, meaning a very short sentence that you found interesting in the book. And finally, 1 thing I wondered about. So whatever in the story you thought was very interesting and that you didn't get an answer for, that 1 thing, write that down. So there you go, activity 3, done and dusted. Activity number 4. This one you're going to do in your workbook again. So you're going to use a clean page in your workbook. You're going to write the date, 2nd July 2020, whichever day it is you do this activity on, and then the heading, reading with your senses. So let's quickly discuss what we're going to do. So you don't have a worksheet like that, but I'm using this for our discussion. So I want you to think about the story Little Red Riding Hood. And we're going to think of what is the things you saw, which are the things you heard, touched, tasted, or smelled. Okay, so what did we see? She walked through a green forest or green woods. There was pretty flowers that she picked. Then she saw her grandmother's long ears and big mouth and the hairy face. Can you see I didn't write any sentences? I just wrote words. And of course there is adjectives with each of those words. So what sounds were there in that story? Well, maybe there were birds in the woods. And of course then there was Gran's very weird voice, which was of course the wolf's voice. Touch. She found that Gran's skin was very strange when she was holding or touching her hand or her face. It was all hairy, right? So then I thought there wasn't really something about taste in the story. And then finally, The smell could have been Mom's fresh baking that she put in the basket for Red Riding Hood to take to her grandmother. So in your book now, you're going to draw 1, 2, 3, 4 lines and space them out evenly on the page using your ruler. And then, of course, you're going to write the headings: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. And you're going to draw a line underneath. And then in each of those columns, you're going to write down what each of your senses you've experienced in the book. Once again, like I said, only words, and use some describing words with it. Now we're moving to activity number 5, finally. Okay, here you are going to take a book that you loved reading, that you know quite well, and you're going to pretend you're the host of a talk show. And you're going to interview this character from your storybook. So imagine you are interviewing Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk. What you're going to do here is you are only going to design 5 questions that you would like to ask this character. You're not going to answer the questions. I only want the questions. So think of the following question words to help you set up your questions. Like who? So what would you ask Jack? Well, who else was living with a giant in his castle? Where? Whatever, where else would you have found money if you didn't have the giant beanstalk? And try to think of some original, interesting questions. When? Oh, when do you think did Jack eventually go out and find a job? Any questions you can think of, guys. What? Any what question you want to ask your character? What was the relationship between you and your mom, Jack? So you are talking to Jack at a show. And then finally, how? How did you manage to climb that beanstalk, which must have been super duper long? Okay. Have lots of fun reading to yourself and doing these activities. I hope to see you super soon. Goodbye, grade 4s.